I'd like to be remembered as an internationalist who knew and loved people and built connections all over the world, really, in Russia and China and Ukraine, Taiwan, Australia, New Zealand, and throughout Latin America. And I think those connections, I hope those connections, I know those connections are very important in bringing people together.
Who is Peter Raven?
He is one of the world's great plant biologists and a champion of global biodiversity. As one colleague put it, he is a dynamo intellectually with a passion for science, for nature, and for conservation, with a good dose of fun mixed in. Time magazine hailed him as a hero for the planet.
He has a heart that is so big. He loves people. He loves plants. He loves butterflies. He expresses joy in every day. He finds things to make us all smile all the time.
We salute a man who, in the words of one admirer, has touched the whole world with the power of science and the moral imperative of the conservation of life. Peter Raven.
A grand sycamore in the garden of science, he has nourished our knowledge of the phyla of flora and cultivated care for the precious diversity of life. Peter Hamilton Raven, Doctor of Science.
It always surprises me when Peter gives a speech at a university somewhere. At the end, the students clamor up. His groupies want autographs and things. They want to touch the hem of the master. But there's always a faculty member who comes up and says, I heard you speak in 1989 at Yale, or I heard you give a talk in California, and it changed my career. I changed my major. I've chosen a different path. I listened to what you had to say, and I wanted to do something important for the planet.
But there are many other problems connected with our rapid population growth. For example, pollution, urban problems, unrest, all of which need a broad attack on the same level as population problems do all over the world.
A distinguished teacher, he has written leading textbooks on both botany and the environment, and mentored scores of grateful students. An energetic citizen of science, he has been a central figure in the work of both the National Academy of Sciences and the National Geographic Society. Recognized worldwide for his leadership in conservation and sustainability, he has been elected to scientific academies in nearly 20 nations, from Denmark to New Zealand, from Brazil to China, to India. He helped lead a massive project to classify the 31,500 species of plants in China, and has been a catalyst for international scientific collaboration.
Who is Peter Raven? He's just a happy soul.
This epilogue features reflections from family, friends, and colleagues, filmed immediately following the celebration of life for Peter H. Raven, the 13th of June, 2026. What would have been Peter's 90th birthday?
Our oldest boy, Francis, who's about 45, homeschools both of his boys who are 12 and 6. And so his son, his older son, my grandson, actually publishes a bulletin now on backyard conservation, which he puts out quarterly. it's quite amazing the way that he's, after being interested in various things at younger ages, beginning to track some of the exact same things that I did.
I'm Francis Raven. I'm Peter's son. My dad was a very funny, warm person. Actually, what strikes me the most about him is just his immense warmth when being in his presence.
I met Peter Raven when I was 16, and I was not aware of his stature. I met him in very casual circumstances, but immediately recognized that he would be a very important person in my life. And he was my second father, and I could always call on him for advice and introductions, and he followed me in my trajectory these past 62 years.
My name is Mauricio Diaz Granados, and I'm Chief Science Officer at the New York Botanical Garden. I was brought to St. Louis by Peter Raven. He didn't know who I was, but he accepted to be my advisor of the dissertation. And because of him, I pursued my PhD at St. Louis University and the Missouri Botanical Garden. Peter really transformed my life and my career.
So I'm Kamal Bava from Boston. I have been a professor at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and I'm also founder of Ashoka Trust for research in ecology and the environment. I've known Peter for a number of years. I would say almost more than 50 years. It was a privilege to know him. We became very good friends. And I think one thing about Peter was his care and his concern, compassion for other human beings.
Well, my name is Frank Wolf, and I'm an attorney, and I met Peter Raven in 1971 when he joined the garden, which was the same month I began practicing law. I always realized when I worked with him that he was different than any other person that I'd ever met. He was saying he was a genius really isn't sufficient. One story may suffice. In 1999, there was a dinner in Washington at the National Academy of Sciences. They have a little building there. And in that room, they were celebrating his 12 years as Home Secretary of the National Academy of Sciences. And the room was filled with brilliant scientists, and then there was me. And one of them said to me, "Do you know what you have in St. Louis with Peter Raven?" And I began to answer, but he stopped me in my tracks. And he said, "You have one of the 5 most important biologists in the world. He basically has all of botany in his head." And that comment stayed with me forevermore.
To the world and China, Peter was an icon and a giant in botany, biodiversity, and sustainability.
Don Weekend is a wonderful sculptor in St. Louis who's enriched our area and many other areas around the world with his lovely creations. I met him because in the garden we had a Cora, a beautiful statue of a little girl, which he had done earlier, and then eventually acquired a pair of teenagers running, which we set into the forest there. And I met him in connection with his works at the garden and through our mutual friend, Mary Faust. And as I got to know and appreciate him, I realized what a wonderful addition or contributor he is to the cultural welfare of our community.
Peter Raven is one of the more brilliant men that I've met in my life. His work with biology and the environment and horticulture is just unbelievable. I had met Peter before, but we became friends after the Cora. We started becoming friends, and then as time went on, he came to the studio and I cast his hand holding a vase, and we became friends. And he loved what the garden, our mini garden here, the property. So he was always writing letters and helping us try to get the garden and the park on the National Registry, and he became a very big supporter of the studio.
Initially as a botanist, I did my thesis on the Galapagos Islands. Then I worked for a year in a Flora project in Venezuela that didn't work out. And then I came to the garden on a postdoc. And so after a year, they decided we'll keep him. And studying the Lauraceae, the avocado family, Peter immediately threw everything at me. I mean, once the decision was made that I was going to work on Lauraceae, he arranged for me to get all American Lauraceae from 4 European herbaria: Geneva, Brussels, Copenhagen, and the British Museum. That is a staggering amount of material that he just got on my behalf, because he wanted me to really dive in the group.
So who is Peter Raven? Well, growing up in St. Louis, I have known Peter all my life, but of course, initially from afar, and have always been in awe of him. But the amazing thing about Peter, I'm now at Duke University working on environmental policy. I'm a tropical rainforest biologist. The thing about Peter is the more you get to know him, the more you realize that he has such empathy and such humanity that while from afar he's a little scary because he's just got such a big vision and such a big voice and such a presence. But as soon as you get the opportunity to interact with him, you realize that he is about the most human person you could ever possibly meet. And for me, as I'm sure you've heard from so many other people, every point in my life that I would interact with him, he would find some way to help me.
I'm the Doris Duke Chair of Conservation at Duke University in North Carolina. I could tell you so many things about Peter. I have written some highly influential papers with Peter involving plants and plant biodiversity. And you might say, what do you know about plant biodiversity? And the answer is not much. But Peter held my hand and we did some great stuff together. He had this enormous ability to bring people together to solve problems. And I was fortunate to solve a bunch of problems working with Peter directly. But he was always connecting here and there and making sure things happened. He was an amazing machine for greasing the wheels of conservation science.
I am an evolutionary biologist. I study how species evolve and adapt to their environment. I've spent my career studying lizards, and recently I've started studying cats. I'm a professor at Washington University in St. Louis, and I'm the director of something called the Living Earth Collaborative, which is a partnership between WashU, the Missouri Botanical Garden, and the St. Louis Zoo. Peter Raven is perhaps the most amazing person I've ever met. Scientifically, his research at a young age changed the course of our understanding of nature and how it evolves. But then he moved on to take on one of the major institutions of botanical knowledge in the world and turn it into something that was into one of the world's leading institutions of botanical scholarship. Along the way, he advised presidents, popes, the Dalai Lama. He was important in starting the environmental movement. He was named the Hero of the Planet by Time magazine. He just accomplished any one of those feats would have been enough for most people to say that had a good career, and he did all of that and more.
He didn't make any distinction. I mean, he treated very distinguished peers and graduate students alike. And he would actually devote more attention to students than to his peers.
After going through the PhD, I moved to various institutions, and Peter all the time was supporting me through each of the steps of my career.
He not only hired people, he really created the conditions where they could excel.
But the thing that I really loved about Peter is his sense of humor.
Peter was a remarkable humorist. His great humor really makes things really interesting.
He would send my brother and I, and many other people I'm sure, these regular emails full of really bad puns and dad jokes. And I've mentioned this to other people who said they managed to get off the list, but I loved them. And I would read the whole thing, find the worst of them, and shamelessly repeat them to others.
I would have said it's a cold day in hell when I don't get an email from Peter. And, you know, if I went 3 days without an email from Peter, I'd be on the phone to Pat saying, is Peter okay?
Sometimes it seemed, you know, yes, science was important to him, but what was more important to him was to help others achieve their full potential.
And he not just gave me a lot of encouragement and confidence, but also to many other people, including students and colleagues that I know.
Yeah, he definitely was smarter. I think a lot of people's parents, they, at some point you realize they're not the smartest person in the world. And I never had that because he actually was really smarter than other people. And even when he didn't know things, it always came out that he was smarter. And just very humbling to know that, to be in a space with somebody so smart. But he wasn't arrogant. He was just very kind and warm. And I'll miss him.
Who is Peter Raven? He is the person that creates the conditions for other people to do really good work, and he helps them achieve that.
So I'm one of hundreds of people that Peter mentored as a young scientist. Even though my field was different than his, he was also truly a wonderful, fatherly, engaged friend, as well as a mentor. And he promoted the vital idea that we humans need to develop much stronger empathy with other human beings of all shapes, sizes, colors, and creeds.
Peter had an enormously important influence on China. But Peter, of course, was born in China. He was born in Shanghai.
Peter and I share many things. Both he and I were born in China, and we both love pandas. I have a long-term project on pandas, people, and policy. And we published the first paper together in 2003 on China's protected areas in Science magazine.
And for as long as I've known Peter, he was a vigorous proponent of China, Chinese scientists, Chinese botanists, and Chinese biodiversity.
When I started to do some research in China, he made sure that he connected me.
He told me about the importance of China back in the 70s when people didn't really understand that, but he had a real understanding of what China was going to become.
He was greatly interested in India, as we all know, and we traveled to India together many times, and each trip lasting 2 to 3 weeks. You know, he would talk very often with me about Bollywood movies, And do you know what was his favorite movie? Slumdog Millionaire. Because the story is about a downtrodden kid living in the slums, becoming a millionaire. And you can see the connection. And once he told me, look, there's a potential in every human being.
Who was Peter Raven?
He was my hero. He was my mentor, my hero, brightest man I ever met.
And to me, he was a dear friend, mentor, and colleague, collaborator.
He was one of the most influential and creative and effective champions of nature.
I was sitting there this morning and I was looking at the screen and I realized I miss him.
He will be greatly missed and warmly remembered. And his extraordinary legacy will long last and will continue to inspire the world to work on issues that he cared about to make the world a much better place.
He'd always send me books and I would try to read them and we talk about them. And just recently, maybe 6 months ago, he sent me the last book, which was called Natural Capital, and I read it and talked to him about it, and I talked to him regularly up till about a week before he died. And it leaves a big hole in my life that he's not there.